All right, today we're going to talk about isosceles and equilateral triangles. First of all, we're going to just review the triangles, classifying the triangles by the angles. If you have three acute angles, then it's an acute triangle. One obtuse angle, it's an obtuse triangle. One right angle makes it a right triangle. Three congruent angles makes it an equal angular triangle. All right, we're going to start off right here, and we're going to classify each triangle. If you look right here, it says classify the triangle with the angle that contains CDE, contains the angle CDE. So CDE is right there. Look in that triangle, and you notice that it has a right angle. So that makes it a right triangle. All right? The next triangle we're going to look at contains the angle BCE. If you look in there, we don't have any right angles. We do have an obtuse angle, so therefore that's going to make it an obtuse triangle. The next triangle is going to contain the angle ABE. If you look in there, it's got these little marks in there telling us that each of the angles are congruent to each other. So therefore, it is an equal angular triangle. Next, the triangle containing the angle BDE. We look through there. I know that part of it has a right triangle in it, but that doesn't go all the way over. That goes... The next thing we're going to look at is triangle BDE. Now you'll notice that CDE had the right triangle in it, the right angle in it, but this one goes a little further. So that means this one has an obtuse angle in it. So he is going to be an obtuse triangle. Our next triangle is going to include the angle CFE. Now again, we've got that right triangle in there, but the right triangle applies to CED. So our triangle doesn't go all the way over to D, so the right angle doesn't go all the way over. So if we look through there, it's got all acute angles, so it's going to be an acute triangle. Now we're going to talk about classifying triangles by their sides. So if you've got three congruent sides, don't forget your little tick marks here means that that's congruent, that side's congruent to that side, which is congruent to that side. So if you have three congruent sides, it's an equilateral triangle. Now we're not going to forget that if the sides are all equal, guess what? All the angles are equal as well. So an equilateral triangle is also an equal angular triangle. Just a little tidbit there. Okay, if only two sides are congruent, that's called an isosceles triangle. So the base angle down here, the base side down here is not congruent to these dudes over there. All right, if there's absolutely no sides that are congruent, it's considered a scalene. Let's give it a shot. All right, we've got JKM. JKM is the whole triangle. It's the big triangle. If you look right there, we don't see any of the sides congruent to each other. So therefore, it's going to be a scalene triangle. Next, we're going to look at triangle KLN. If you notice, it's got two tick marks on both of these sides right here, and then one tick mark on that one. So that means these two sides are congruent. Therefore, only two sides are congruent, so it's an isosceles triangle. The last one is triangle JKN. If we look at this, all three sides have one tick mark on them. That means all three sides are congruent, and that means it's an equilateral triangle. Well, it's also an equal angular and an equilateral, but right now we're classifying by the sides, so it's equilateral. All right, now let's combine the two. We're going to talk about classifying the triangles by the angles and by the sides. Okey-doke? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, doesn't matter if you do it by the sides first or the angles first. We're just going to make sure that we look at both. So right here we notice that these two sides are the same. So we know at least we're going to have an isosceles triangle right here. Now as far as the angles go, we notice that we have a right angle in there. So that's going to make this an isosceles right triangle. The sides and the angles, isosceles right. The next one is going to be, oops, I shouldn't have done that one yet, sorry. Again, we're going to have two sides that are congruent. That makes two of the angles congruent, by the way. Hopefully you remember that the corresponding angles with the sides and the angles correspond. So that makes those two, The next triangle that we have is going to have two sides that are the same as well, which hopefully you remember also means that the opposite angles are congruent as well. Hopefully you remember that. Okay, so we're going to look through the sides. We know we're talking isosceles. Then we look at the angles. All of them are acute angles, so it's an isosceles acute. Let's look at this next one. None of the sides are the same, so we know we're dealing with scalene. And the angles, we have one angle that's 91 degrees, so it's going to be a scalene acute. All right, over here, 10, 10, and 10, all the sides are the same, and again, all the angles will be the same. Notice that there's 60-degree angles. They have to all be 60, or else it won't equal up to 180. Look at there. So this one is an equilateral and it's an acute because all of them are 60. All right, your turn. You try to classify each one. Number 9. All right, try number 10. Try number 10. Number 10. Try number 11. 11. Try number 12. Awesome, number 12. Let's try number 13. There you go, 13. And lastly, 14. Okie doke. Hopefully you did well. Hopefully you did good. All right, so now what I want you to do is you're going to come in here and you're going to look that. All right, here's what they give you. They tell you that PR bisects SRT. So that means that this angle right here, the 30-degree angle, is also congruent to this angle right here. So both of these angles are 30 degrees. That's one thing it tells you. Then it tells you that U right here is the midpoint of RT. So that means that this one is 8 meters, so this one is also 8 meters. Kiddo? So you know that that's 30, that's 30. All right, let's try to see what each of these triangles are going to be. First triangle we're going to look at is UQR. And we notice that there's two sides that are congruent and that it has an obtuse angle in it. So it's going to be an obtuse isosceles. The next triangle is going to be RST. RST is going to contain 16 right here. The side that's 16, well, these two sides add up to be 16. One of the things that could have clued you in was that both of these angles were 60, so that meant that the two sides were going to be congruent as well. So that is obviously right away going to be an an isosceles triangle. Let's see if there's anything else going on though. If you look further, you're going to notice that this is 8 and this is 8 as well. So that means all three sides are 16. You can also check right here because this one is this angle is 30 degrees, and so this angle is 30 degrees. So that means all the angles are 60, which means it's an equilateral and equal angular triangle. Okay, cheated on this next one here. We've got, I went ahead and pushed the button too quickly, but that's okay. Because we got SRQ, and then we notice that that's a right angle in there, so that's going to be a right scalene triangle because one's 90 degrees, one's 60 degrees, one's 30 degrees. So that means all the sides are going to be different. You got 8 meters here and 16 meters here. And you don't know what size, how long that one is, but it doesn't matter because the angles are unequal, so that means the sides are going to be unequal. Okay, try the next 3 on your own. Number 18. Number 19. Number 20. Awesome. Okay, now we're going to talk about isosceles triangles. Here, take a second and study over this isosceles triangles, the information on here. We know that 2 sides of the triangles are congruent, and then the opposite angles are congruent. Just like we talked about, the sides and the angles correspond with each other. So this angle, number 2, corresponds with this side over here. This angle number 3 corresponds with side AB, right there. So if AB is congruent to BC, then that means angle A is congruent to angle C. Well, it works both ways. If angle A is congruent to angle C, then side AB is congruent to side BC. Let's look at the parts of the isosceles triangle. 2 congruent sides are called legs. All right, tell me 2 of the congruent sides. We've got AB and BC. Those 2 are legs. The angle where the legs intersect is called the vertex angle. So angle 1 up here is the vertex angle. The side opposite the vertex angle, right down here, he is called the base angle. He's called the base. So that's side AC. The angles along the sides are called the base angles. So that's angle 2 and angle 3. So those are the base angles. All right, using this information that we know about these isosceles triangles, let's figure out some of the information about some of the angles and different things like that. Okay, so if these 2 sides are congruent, that means angle J and L are congruent, so that means J is also 68 degrees. So if that's the case, you have to say 2 times 68, and then you have to subtract that from 180. Okay? That's going to make angle K 44 degrees. All right? Number 2, if this angle is 106 and these 2 sides are congruent, that means this angle and this angle are going to be congruent because they're opposite the corresponding sides, the congruent sides. If that's the case, then we have to say 180 minus 106. Find out what that is. And then we divide that in 2. We divide that in half. All right, so that means it's 180 minus 106 is 74. You divide that into 2 because both of these angles are congruent. So that means each angle is 37 degrees. All right, so if you know these two angles are congruent, that means you know that these two sides are congruent because it's an isosceles. So that means YZ has also got to be 12 centimeters. All right, so what does that